too late.
Woo! Here we go. Oh yeah. There's Maya, and then get this guy up there. Yeah, big wave. Woo! There she is.
Woohoo! Yes, right. Okay, here we are. So, good morning. Good morning, Timothy. Thank you for being there on the boat and for the additional um,
Color.
color. Yes, the spice. Okay, thanks a lot for that. This is Sunday morning, April 7th, and it is Japanese politics one-on-one. I seem to have difficulty actually doing the intro and the opening of this podcast. So thank you everybody who has joined us on LinkedIn, also in Clubhouse and YouTube. We're now starting the 165th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One with the CEO of Langley Esquire, Timothy Langley. We have been here for more than 3 years, and it has always been Timothy, the star of the show. Hi. And today he reports from Chiba,
Hota.
from Hota, the port of Hota. And without any further ado, I'll give the floor to Timothy so that we don't waste any time on small talk. Timothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Small Talk. Good morning,
Right.
everybody, and welcome to the 165th episode of Japan Politics One-on-One. One-on-one means that it's one-on-one. We're talking to you. You can talk to us and contribute to the conversation by joining on Clubhouse or by putting your thoughts and your comments in on LinkedIn. And Maya is monitoring those and then feeding them to us so that we can have a wider discussion, a more inclusive discussion after I finish my briefing. Today, I'm broadcasting from the sailing port of Hota. It's on the Tokyo Bay side of the Chiba Peninsula. It looks a little bit quiet today, a little bit overcast. It's supposed to become more sunny, but we're gearing up towards the real, really getting into spring and the sailing season. So you can anticipate these broadcasts coming to you from ports all over the Tokyo region where I am licensed to sail. So it's going to be an active sailing season, an active year in Japanese politics, obviously. And just to get you up to speed, the cherry blossoms finally did bloom. As you might not know, the Meteorological Agency of Japan announces when there is a full bloom in Tokyo, and they did this in Tokyo on Friday. A couple of officials showed up at Yasukuni Shrine. There is a tree that's planted there. If you've never been there, you should go by and see it. It was planted by the emperor. And so this tree, when it blooms, when it reaches full capacity, they announce that the rest of Tokyo is now in line with that tree. And it was a big news event. There were a lot of people there with their pictures, and the two guys in the suits looked at the cherry trees and the cherry tree and the blossoms, and they said, yes, it's about 80% full. So we announced that now Tokyo is in full bloom. So thank God for that. And it's much anticipated. It's about 10 days late this year, although it was anticipated to be earlier when we first began to follow the reports. Also big in the news today, as you know, the Prime Minister leaves for Washington, D.C. Tomorrow. He wanted to make sure that he was here to take in this briefing first. He'll be in Washington, D.C. until Saturday. So it's a rather long trip. It's a state visit, but it's not quite a state visit because he's not legally the head of state. The head of state is the emperor. So it's a quasi-state visit, but it comes with all the bells and whistles because he is the prime minister. This is such an important visit. It's the first time since Abe Obama met maybe 12 years ago for the prime minister to go to the United States. And this is a big one for the prime minister. I don't know how big it is for Mr. Biden. He's in the middle of an election campaign, gearing up for that. But for the prime minister, it's a big deal, and the schedule is absolutely packed, and I want to get into that. But the dynamics are so ripe right now with what was going on with the political scandal and what happened on Friday and Thursday with the punishments being meted out, and the snap election coming up in just a couple of weeks. It's just a really rich mix of a lot of things going on politically, internally, and now with the prime minister going to the United States, there's a lot going on, not just diplomatically, but particularly militarily, with a lot of meetings that are slated there for a very tight schedule. So Dan Harada and I will come again on Friday, this Friday at noon, to give you a snapshot of what's going on, because we anticipate there's so much happening in the whole political world, in the whole context, that you need a little bit more color, and we're going to give you an immediate analysis of what's going on there Friday at noon. It probably won't be more than an hour. Half an hour. It'll be a one-way briefing, no Q&A, and it will be, if you follow us live, that's the only time you'll be able to catch this briefing until Maya encapsulates it, polishes it, and then uploads it on YouTube, probably on a Saturday or Sunday. So if you want the hot news, tune in on Friday. So as I think everybody on this briefing understands, the prime minister, laid down the hammer. He announced his punishments. They had already pretty much identified who was going to be punished for all of these kickback scandals, and the main name on the billboard is Abe, although there were 4 factions that were implicated. The number 1 faction, of course, was the Abe faction, where this kickback tactic, this scheme was first hatched about 20 years ago. And the other factions caught wind of it and thought, this is a good idea, maybe we should follow that. So they mimicked it, maybe not as adroitly as the Abe faction, but the Abe faction had a head start. But the Kishida faction also partook in the same sort of scheme. Also the Motegi faction and the Nikai faction. And as a consequence of that, there's just been this unbelievable turmoil in the parliament. I think for people who have been watching Japanese politics, you remember the recruit scandal, you remember some of the other scandals that have come up. This one is really big. This one is much bigger than those previous scandals, and it has affected the texture and the character of the LDP. And we haven't seen the end of that yet. We are going to be seeing that, but this is just at the very beginning. The prime minister laid down the law. He said, these guys are guilty. These are your punishments. And now he's off to, a foreign country's visit. It's not all said and done. The LDP wants it to be said and done. The prime minister definitely wants it to be just a finished product. He wants to go to the United States and announce, that he's cleaned this mess up, that he's clean. And in fact, you'll remember, if you've been watching this briefing, that he announced himself to be clean about 2 weeks ago. He said, I did an investigation and I'm blameless. I didn't really receive any money on the kickback scandal. And my faction, although I'm not the chairman of the faction anymore, because as soon as the scandal broke, I resigned, but the faction happens to be clean too. But those Abe guys, they really are a pain in my butt, and we're going to come get them. And so there are probably 80 members of the LDP who have been implicated in pocketing money. And this money being pocketed, it's not like they were doing it by themselves with no kind of organizational mind behind it. This was all run by the factions, and the factions collected the money based on parties that were hosted by individual members of their factions, but also participated on and facilitated by the party or by the faction leadership. And so the monies that were coming in, you pay a little bit of money to come in and have a dinner and a briefing. Those monies were collected by the factions and then distributed according to a special pecking order. So when all is said and done, the prime minister has a real bone for the Abe faction and for Mr. Abe, because as Mr. Abe was the longest serving prime minister, Mr. Kishida was the longest serving foreign minister. And he really wanted to become prime minister. And because of Mr. Abe, because of a lot of different things, he didn't get that shot. Mr. Suga got the shot when Mr. Kishida felt like it should have been him. Mr. Suga lasted for 1 year. We had an election. There were 4 people that were candidates. They had a runoff election. Those 4 became 2, and then Mr. Kishida won over Konotaro. And that's where we are right now. The Prime Minister's term of office as the president of the LDP ends in September. And he's looking very much at that. And this is part of the design. And many people would have said before this whole scandal came out that unless you have the backing of the Abe faction, you're not going to become prime minister, and your ability to push, even if you are prime minister, push policies through the Diet machinery is probably fatally retarded with the number of people in the Abe faction. So one of the first jobs of the prime minister when this scandal broke was to dismiss the Abe faction. He dismissed his own faction too, but he dismissed the Abe faction first and foremost, and has really been on a bend to identify who in the Abe faction are the guilty. And he's identified those, and we know who they are, and we know how much money all of the people got, but not everybody is getting punished. In the reprimands that were distributed, and as if you're reading the synopsis that I produce every week after the briefing, it's probably 3 or 4 days after the briefing, you'll know that the prime minister set up a panel to distribute or to identify who is going to be punished and what kind of punishment they would get. This panel was led by the prime minister. It included Mr. Motegi, who's the secretary general of the LDP, and Mr. Moriyama, who is the faction leader of one of the factions that was not implicated in the scandal, but disbanded anyway. So this group of 3 decided everything. So what this tells you is that this is an internal matter. They wanted to keep it an internal matter. They didn't want it to become more public than it already was with the, oh my God, the ethics committee and the upper house ethics committee. They just didn't want that. So the prime minister had to move very quickly. That's why he disbanded he disbanded his own faction. He went to the ethics committee voluntarily without an invitation, without telling anybody he was going to do that. He just showed up. So he's been doing these things very proactively so that when the time comes for him to met out the punishment, people within the LDP circle, that doesn't mean just LDP members, but people who vote for the LDP and people who are registered as LDP members, would say, yes, he had a tough thing to do. He really needed to clean house. He has expressed his own contrition and has accepted some responsibility for that. So we'll give him a pass. Excuse me. So I think that explains many of the things that he's done, but he waited until the last possible time on Friday. He's leaving on Monday. So this was the last time he could have absolutely done anything to show that he was in charge of things. And what he did was he identified 4 members of the Abe faction who would get the most severe punishment. There were 8 categories of severe punishment. Nobody received the most severe one. 2 received the second most severe. So the first most severe one is get the hell out of the LDP. You are ejected from the LDP. The second classification is you receive a recommendation that you might want to consider resigning voluntarily. That went to 2 individuals. And then there's other classifications all the way down to the bottom where you get a finger wagging that you shouldn't do this sort of thing again. So the scorecard looks like this. There were 39 members of the LDP, mostly, but not exclusively, Abe faction. Let me see, there was 2 of them who were asked to resign, not forced to, but asked to resign. One of them said, screw it, I'm out, I'm resigning. That was Mr. Sekko, who was the Secretary General of the upper house within the Abe faction. The other person was Mr. Shionoya, who was the Secretary General of the Abe faction, kind of the leader. Mr. Sekko was also a leader, but Shionoya was probably the titular head. And he was asked to resign too. And he said, you know, God damn it, how about you, Kishida? What about you? And how about these other things that were going on? So he's a little bit of a firebrand. He hasn't completely accepted the the distribution of penalties. But beyond those two, you've got another two, Mr. Nishimura, who used to be the METI minister, very popular guy, young. He didn't receive that much money, but he was influential within the Abe faction. And Mr. Hakubun Shimomura, who was Minister of Education. He was very close to Mr. Abe. He did receive a good chunk of money, but these two individuals were told that for 1 year you are kind of suspended from the LDP. If there's an election for the LDP president, you can't run in it. You can't vote in it. If there's an election for your seat within this year, the LDP is not going to support you. So you need to figure out how you're going to be endorsed. If you're an independent candidate, the LDP will not put you on the LDP list. It's a pretty severe penalty, but the people who are receiving this have already been in the parliament for at least 25 years. Mr. Seko has been in the upper house for 25 years. And then there was Mr. Takagi, who was given a 6-month suspended sentence, which means for the next 6 months, you won't have a party position. You can't vote in any party elections, and the LDP will not endorse you or support you if there's an election within the next 6 months. And then the rest of them, that's about maybe 17 also received no special appointments. The LDP won't appoint you to any party positions, any chair positions, that sort of thing. And then the remaining 17 just got, a reprimand. So a lot of people are dissatisfied with that. Some people are happy that it's just moving on and getting over. And in the world of Nagatacho, that's sometimes how it shakes out, that you just hit it and move on, and hopefully it doesn't come back and bite you. This one has legs on it, and I think we haven't seen the end of it. I think for the prime minister, what he wanted to do was wrap it up, finish it, come out somewhat victoriously, and be able to go to Washington, D.C., on other business, but also his, this incident will become a topic of conversation, if not by the U.S. press, certainly by the Japanese press who are following the delegation there. So it's a pretty big deal, and we can get into it a little bit more in the Q&A, but I just wanted to brush over that as quickly as possible. I want to move on now to the Kishida Biden state visit. On Wednesday, there will be a state dinner, and on Thursday, the prime minister will speak to a joint session of the Congress. That's a pretty big deal. It doesn't happen. It's not extended to every head of state that visits the United States or has a state visit. So it's a pretty big deal. My information is that he will be speaking in English. I didn't know that until just maybe a week ago. And it's not solidly confirmed, but I think it would probably be in his benefit to have been practicing. His English is not bad. And I think making a speech to Congress with a teleprompter, it should be okay for him. So I'm anticipating it being in English, and I think it'll be a great speech talking about the U.S.-Japan relationship. There's a lot going on there. There's the president of the Philippines will be in Washington, D.C. at the same time. There's a lot going on in the Philippine Sea, and with the amount of defense equipment and stationing of U.S. troops in the Philippines, and a lot of joint agreements that are being executed now, the real tension between China and the Philippines has really reached a fever level, very alarmingly, and it's something that the United States and Japan need to do something about. The Japanese have donated several Coast Guard cutters to the Philippines, and so the relationship there is beginning to build. So I think that this trip in Washington, D.C. is going to be somewhat epical. There's going to be some big changes there. The United States is pushing, you might have heard, for a joint command to be stationed. Usually the joint command, or at least the Pacific Command, is stationed in Hawaii. They are considering moving a joint command here to Tokyo and assigning a 4-star general to be living in Tokyo, or maybe Okinawa. I'm not sure exactly where, but I think it would probably be in Tokyo. And it would be a joint command where all of the forces of the self-defense forces, air, sea, and land, are together with a U.S. commander and there would be a joint operation of forces and reaction and training, that sort of thing. This is a pretty big move. I don't think since General MacArthur was here has there been a 4-star general assigned to Japan. So this is a very big deal. What they want to focus on in this meeting with Biden and Kishida is the joint development and production of defense equipment. And as you know, the Japanese are already producing Patriot air, surface-to-air missiles. Not many people know that Japan has that kind of capacity and technology. Most of it borrowed from the United States under patent protection, but they are producing these weapons. And the language here is joint development and production of defense equipment, because the Constitution says Japan will have no offensive capabilities, and surface-to-air missiles, I guess, could be considered to be defensive in nature. But there's a real push there, not just by the Japanese, I think also endorsed by the United States, to help Japan build this military industrial complex so that they can have a different industry. I mean, if the Japanese got into building equipment that was, high tech and very serviceable, had a great quality production like the automobile industry, they would be selling like hotcakes, and Japan wouldn't be in the economic doldrums that it is right now. I mean, we report about that all the time. We report about the yen. We report about, the Bank of Japan, because Japan is just, for the last 20 years, you can hear these guys going crazy. Okay. It's not as bad as washing a cat, but there's a lot of push to generate somehow an industry that's going to be generating revenue for Japan, because the automobile industry it sucks up most of the blood. It produces most of the trade revenue. It really props up the economy here. But there are challenges there too with the electric vehicles and that sort of thing. So I think the Japanese government really wants to develop a defense industry that would be defensive, but you could use it offensively too if you were in a pinch. And that's why this joint development with the advanced fighters, Italy, Britain, and Japan, is such a big deal. We reported on it before, where Komeito, who is the coalition partner with the LDP, has decided, yes, wink, wink, nod, that these advanced fighters, they'll be in production and probably hitting the sales, and probably be, first assigned to Britain, Italy, and Japan first, and then sold to other countries. They won't be on the market until 2035 or so. So it's a long way out, but getting Komeito to say, yes, we're going to vote for it when it comes up, and we're going to pretend that it's just defensive in nature, so to push the bill through and to get the money for it. This story is going to continue on, and that's why more and more recently now you will begin to hear about constitutional revision. It's already a topic of conversation among many in the opposition camps. It's been a topic of conversation for 20 years within the LDP. Actually, the LDP was established with one of the concepts that they would revise the Constitution that was kind of fed to them by the United States. So there's always been that drive, but I think you're going to see more and more challenges, because excuse me, the capabilities of the products that are being asked Japan to build and to manufacture and to send to the United States so that they can send them to the Ukraine, for example, is really unavoidable. In fact, the Prime Minister spent 30 minutes talking with Zelensky on Friday, just in anticipation of his trip to the United States. So I think he once again committed full resources and support to Ukraine, and I think you'll probably hear something reflected about that in his speech to the Congress. Moving on, household spending is still down. 22 months it's been down. We were hoping to get a little bit of a kick there with the relaxation of the negative interest rates, the policy that Japan has been following for the last 17 years. But it's the 12th month that consumer spending has been down. Just in February, it's down 0.5%. And real wages are down for the last 22 months. So that means, although last year in the spring offensive and throughout the year, people have received bonuses, maybe incremental pay raises. The money that they have received in comparison with the price of goods and services has just not kept up. And we see there's an announcement just this week that this month there will be 2,800 products that again go, not again, but maybe it's the first time for them, but maybe some of them it's a price increase again, but they will be going up in prices. These are consumer goods, foods and drinks that will be going up in prices this month. So this is an ongoing process. It just never seems to end. Shunto, we're now in April, so the fiscal year starts. The spring offensive is hot on us, and I imagine that we will receive decisions on summer bonuses and on pay for the rest of the fiscal year coming up. It is expected to be around 5.3%, the largest in 35 years for a pay increase for Japanese workers on average. So a lot of people will be getting more than that. A lot of people will be getting less than that. And this is just for the big companies. The smaller companies usually follow in the same kind of step pattern because their employees begin to complain too. And it's unmistakable that the number of workers has declined. So employers have to scramble and hire what they can get. And it's not always the best. The change in the labor market is really dramatic, not just in the United States and in Europe. And you've heard some of the stories with, the kind of millennial way of approaching life. And then you've got the management that wants, people to at their desks and to work hard and to record their timesheets. It's a bit of a challenge. And frankly, the employees have a little bit of an angle on that argument. So the management really needs to consider paying more wages to stop people from job hopping and also keeping them, dedicated to their work. The yen ended the week at 151.61 on Friday. It was up towards 152. This is really worrying for the Japanese government. There is some suggestion of intervention to prop up the yen. This happened about 15 months ago, a massive intervention by the Japanese government. If this decline of the yen continues, I think you can anticipate the Japanese government moving in on that to prop it up. And when they do, it's usually a lot of money to make that difference. The yen has just been in this territory for the last 6 months. It's really been worrying for the Japanese government. And it stayed steadily at around 150, 149 yen to the dollar, dollars to the yen. So it's a real challenge. Spending over the month of March was up, surprisingly, 1.4%. So consumer confidence seems to be building, and that's probably a reflection on it just becoming spring. It's not winter anymore. There's change in the air, and also with the new fiscal year, kids going to school, there's more spending there. Like I said, 2,800 food and drink items will be increasing this month. Utilities in terms of prices were down 19% over this last quarter. Education was up. Education costs were up 42%. So that means that the education usually starts the fiscal year. People don't feel it or hear about it. They're not even billed for it until April for many of the entry fees and that sort of thing. But they're up 42%. Food is up just 2%. But in light of all of this, consumer confidence seems to be up. For those of you, moving on, I've got another boat coming in noisily. I hope it doesn't disturb us. I've got, or rock the boat. For those of you who are really keen on U.S.-Japan relations and dealing with the U.S. Embassy, you might know that Rahm Emanuel, of course, is the ambassador appointed by Mr. Biden to represent the United States. His DCM is a fellow by the name of Ray Green. Ray Green is a well-known feature in the business community. He's the kind of the ambassador when the ambassador is not in office, but he's number 2 in the embassy, and he was just. It hasn't been formally announced, but it looks like he will be sent to Taiwan to be the chief executive there for the American Institute of Taiwan. America doesn't have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. They have an office there that's called the American Institute. It's not an ambassadorial position. So Mr. Green will go there, but within American circles, he'll be called an ambassador. But to keep things nice and calm between China and the United States, even in light of some congressmen visiting Taiwan and ruffling feathers, I think this is a great thing for the United States. You know that the president-elect, they've just had an election in January. They have a new president there, Lai Chang-te, who will be taking office in May. And I think probably if it's required for any kind of confirmation hearings, that will be finished by then. And then Mr. Green will take office probably in the summer. You can see I'm getting rocked around a little bit. Reporting to you live from Santana. So this is big news for Taiwan, for the new president, and also we need to find another DCM for the U.S. Embassy. The by-election is still on the books. The president meets with Joe Biden on the 10th. That is also the time when the elections in South Korea occur. So I had said earlier that the elections included the president. It doesn't include Mr. Yoon as president. It includes the Congress there, and their election culminates on April 10th, which is in just a couple of days. Unrelated to that is the by-election for the 3 seats that the LDP, or that the parliament needs to fill on the 28th of this month. It's a kind of a complicated situation. Dan and I are going to get into it more on Friday, but there are 3 seats that that need to be filled. 2 of them were filled because the LDP politician who held that seat was implicated either in vote buying or in some sort of a funny money with election funds. The 3rd one was made vacant because of the death of the holder of that seat, Mr. Hosoda, who was the Speaker of the House, and that's in Shimane. The LDP has already announced that of the 2 where the LDP held that position and they were ejected, they're not going to run a candidate. They've kind of already conceded, we can't run there, we're already tainted, so we're not even going to run somebody in those 2 seats. With Mr. Hosoda's faction, he was the Speaker of the House. He was from Shimane, and his entire career was from Shimane. He was the leader of the Abe faction, and he was Speaker of the House. How can you not have a repeat there of an LDP person? They still are suffering. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat and replace an LDP individual there. It's going to be a tightly fought race. Interestingly enough, it is also the election district for Mr. Seko, who is, he was the Secretary General of the Upper House. He is the Upper House member from the same prefecture, Wakayama. So this is going to be a difficult row for him. He's been in the Upper House for 25 years. He wanted to resign from the Upper House and run in the Lower House in order to be qualified to run for Prime Minister. This is a tried and true tactic. The Foreign Minister, Mr. Hayashi, he did the same thing, and he's now the Chief Cabinet Secretary. He switched from the Upper House to the Lower House. He is in the Kishida faction, you might remember. Specifically because he also wants to become Prime Minister, and Prime Ministers have never come from the Upper House. They always come from the Lower House. So this is Mr. Hayashi's kind of public announcement that, sorry about that. So the guys, you can see the fishing boat behind me. The fishermen don't like the sailors, so they, they think that the Japanese waters really belong to them, and the guys who are sailing are just a bunch of lazy bastards who don't deserve any respect. So they give us a hard time whenever they can.
Okay, just stay on board.
I'm trying.
And also keep your computer on board too.
I'm holding it down with my other hand, but yeah.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Thanks, Maya.
Thank you.
Not as exciting as you washing your cat, but it's still rock and roll here.
Yeah, I can see that.
So Maya, I just want to wrap this up pretty quickly. I've got one other issue dealing with North Korea. There have been a couple of things going on there. On Tuesday, they launched a hypersonic missile. This is the second one. They're experimenting and testing their capabilities for launching a hypersonic missile. They did that on Tuesday. On Wednesday, they fired two solid-state missiles, expanding their capability and their experience with that new technology. The solid-state rockets are better because you can load them up, you can hide them, you can put them in concealment, and when you need them, you just roll them out and fire them. With a liquid fuel, it takes a lot more time. You don't have as much luxury there. And the hypersonic is just a brand new technology that the Prime Minister will be talking about as well with Joe Biden. A hypersonic technology and development of that, AI, also drones and drone capabilities will be a topic of conversation. But just with Biden and Kishida, it's not just them. It's also the Philippines. It's also the UK. It's also Australia who are in on this this week. So this week will be a very, very impactful week in terms of geopolitics and what's going on with the United States and Japan. But Japan's role in geopolitics is really rising, and people are very interested. I think, in fact, Maya, we've noticed the uptick in the audience because people are really interested in what's going on in Japan. They hear something, but they don't know what's going on or what it means or how they can anticipate what's going to be happening next. And there's nobody else that's really talking about Japanese politics. I mean, Dan Harada has a monthly briefing. If you pay Ichiman and you make yourself available and you go to the venue, but nobody else is doing it. We do it weekly and hopefully, as succinctly as possible.
Yes, indeed. And thank you once again for being there every Sunday morning at 8:20.
Almost.
I know that it is a lot of effort. It requires a lot of discipline. And yeah, so thanks a lot for that. Okay, so are we moving to...
That concludes my briefing, Maya.
Okay, good to know that. I felt like I jumped into the middle of something, Okay. So, well, let's move then into the questions and answer session. Thanks to everybody who stayed with us up until now, and please feel free to come up on stage in Club. Oh, that's my cat. Okay, in Clubhouse. Yes.
What an active day we've got.
Indeed, yes. Or also you can share your comments and thoughts and questions on LinkedIn, or
Oh, she's going crazy.
yes, or oh no, I'm so sorry. LinkedIn and YouTube as well. Okay, so I don't know. I have to check what is on with her once I give you the first question.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question, Timothy, is once again going back to PM Kishida and also to what he has done to the LDP and the factions there. So I actually asked you about a month or two ago about him, and at that point I I wanted to say that it looks like everybody underestimated him, right? Because he has this image of being indecisive.
Yeah.
He has the image of being slow and also of making decisions without consulting anybody in the party. But at the same time, we know that he managed actually to to destroy the strongest faction in the LDP. And we have been told also that the strongest faction has been there ruling the party and also
Yes.
ruling the decisions in the party and also the regulation and lawmaking there. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on this? Is he really the person we think he is? We see him
Yeah.
to be like indecisive and a kind of wonky, or have we underestimated him?
No, I don't think we've quite underestimated him, but he is the president of the LDP. The LDP has a huge building right downtown in Nagatacho. It has a staff of probably 300 people. He is the prime minister of Japan. His office is, right in the center of the Diet complex. It employs about 500 people just in the prime minister's office. And within that complex, there are people who are just dedicated to preparing the prime minister, to protecting the prime minister, to projecting what the prime minister should be doing in any kind of situation. So this idea about showing up for the ethics committee, I don't think it was an idea that just sprung into his brain. I think most of our assessment of him as a personality is pretty accurate, but he's got this huge machinery behind him, and they these are smart guys. These are guys that have been involved at a very high level in protecting and promoting Japan on so many different levels. So as a prime minister, he is the chief spokesman, he is the leader. He receives a lot of discretion and a lot of maybe I don't want to say undeserved respect, but a lot of respect. So he can call the shots and he can ignore people, and people don't criticize him for that as they might with any other typical Japanese. And you can see that in his swagger and his walk and how he deals with people and what he's done. He's just been so surgical about the Abe faction, and you can imagine that he's just got a real bone to pick. I mean, all of the headaches that he's had over the last 20 years he can probably implicate the the Abe faction in having some form of involvement in that. So yeah, there is a little bit of vengeance there. Vengeance has not been had either completely by the prime minister or even by the opposition within the LDP against him. And so he's triggered some of that. He's generated a few more enemies. Certainly, Mr. Seko is now resigned from the LDP. He will be hell-bent. There might be some other combinations of members that come up to challenge him. But at least these guys are not going to be able to vote on the president of the LDP, the ones that he's identified. Not so many, maybe 15 of the 39. But the story's not over yet, so there's much more to be done. And yeah, sometimes he does surprise us with some of the choices and the decisions that he makes. So just hang around and see, keep tuned in, because you never know here in Japanese politics.
Right. Okay. I wanted just to show who was, so noisy a couple of minutes ago. Thank you for that, Timothy. And I think that I'll ask you the same questions in a month or two. A question in a
Okay.
month or
Yeah.
two. Okay. Great. So, moving. Okay. Sorry. Oh, no, 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 no. This is okay. Once again, she has been moving around. No, go ahead. No, no. Apologies for this. Okay.
She's still mad for you hair, blow drying her like that.
Indeed. Okay. So, yes. We have a question on Facebook actually from Hiroaki, and his question is about PM Kishida's visit to the United States, the state visit. Hiroaki asked, what are your thoughts about PM Kishida visiting North Carolina? Why is that? And why, for example, not California?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Hiroaki always comes up with something really good like that. Maybe it's a little bit closer. It is a Toyota plant that he's visiting. We've talked about it before. The automobile economy, basically supports the entire Japanese economy. It is one of the hallmarks of the Japanese entire industry. So if you remove the automobile from the economic mix, Japan is just totally destroyed. I mean, there's so much automobiles and automobile parts support the economy here, although it's played down. High tech and components, some finished products also make it up, but most of the component manufacturing has been offshored to places where the labor cost is lower, and Japan is more and more dedicated to services. So yeah, visiting the production facilities, I think, is probably a good idea, because number one, he's not just the prime minister; he is also, the chief spokesperson for Japan's products and their services. So I think that's probably one of the other reasons. But you can imagine that Toyota lobbied pretty hard to get him while he was in the United States to at least pay a visit, and it boosts morale. It helps increase sales, and there's probably a couple of different other things that are going on there. He could have just as well gone to California. You're right. A lot of calculations go into that, and I'm not that familiar with them.
Okay, well, thank you for the answer, Hiroaki. I hope that this was an answer that you appreciate. And then the next one, we have Yuka with us, of course, but before you came up on stage in Clubhouse, we got another comment on LinkedIn, and it is from Albert Lee. Thank you very much for the question, Albert. Timothy, I'm going to read it to you.
Okay, I put my sunglasses on so I can listen better.
Good. Okay. That's important to know. Okay, I was only just reading about DCM Green's importance to Ambassador Emmanuel.
Yes.
To Ambassador Emmanuel's approach so far. Depending on who gets appointed, what would you watch out for in who gets appointed in the next DCM? And what would it signal for Emmanuel's approach going forward?
That's a pretty sophisticated question.
Right. Yes.
So first of all, you have to consider Rahm Emanuel and his position as ambassador to the United States in Japan. What his intentions are in getting this position, how long he wants to be out of the circle, the mix in Washington, D.C. And I think it's probably safe to say that it's a one-term position for him. I don't know. I've never sat down and talked with him. In fact, I've never met the ambassador. But he is a person that's bent on returning back to, national politics. He deserves that as a figure. I think probably part of coming to Japan and receiving the ambassadorial portfolio is just to kind of let the heat die down on his previous tenure and the kind of negatives that were directed at him, and then come back anew. And I think that that's a very smooth and very good approach. He doesn't need to be here for 2 terms. And if in the election, if Mr. Trump returns, his tenure will be over in days. Mr. Trump will be very swift in reappointing and giving the marching orders to all of the ambassadors until he selects his own ambassadorial. What's the name for that? The administration. It's not an administration, but it's like just the role of ambassadors in the State Department. But with regard to the DCM, so what you want for the DCM is somebody who's tried and true. Ray Green was tried and true. He was counsel in Okinawa. He had already had a position in Taiwan. He speaks Mandarin. He speaks Japanese. He's a true professional within the State Department, and that's the kind of individual you want. It's not a political appointment. It is really a working class job. So there are probably 10, 12 individuals that fit that bill, and I don't know what the candidates who are running for that look like. And in fact, the announcement of Ray Green has not even been made public yet, but we all expected that to be the choice. It's the the smartest choice, but you never know until the fat lady sings. So um, I don't know if I can really add more than just that, but it's an interesting mix. When you consider the current ambassador and who would be ambassador next, and who did he replace, and that sort of thing. I understand that Caroline Kennedy was in town just recently too, as a matter of fact.
Right.
She's the ambassador now to Australia, so looks like a professional gig for her going forward.
Right. Well, thanks. And Yuka, before we move on to the next questions on LinkedIn, we've got another one there from Rumiko. Yuka, could you please chime in? What are your thoughts, comments, questions today? Good morning.
Oh, I can wait because I'm so used to it. I'm sorry.
I know.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's a good one.
Yes.
What?
That's a good one, Yuka.
Okay, I'm gonna just throw something in here. So
Yes.
actually I was gonna ask you, Timothy, what is your thought about NBC or CBS is closed?
How about that?
Yes.
But is there something to do with the Japanese politics? That's why I got a different question. So should I go with the different question?
Go
ahead.
Okay. So this is another scandal which is not as big as kickbacks, but I'm referring to resignation of governor of Shizuoka Prefecture. So my understanding is he says he made some derogatory remarks toward workers in agricultural field. So is that really the reason that he has to resign?
Okay.
So is it that major offense, or I'm missing something? There's something behind. There's something more.
Oh, that there's something more. It's the maglev controversy. JR Central is elated that they had something to throw dirt at him for, and this idea, just to give people a little bit more insight into what's going on. It's April 1st. Shinyu Shain, all the new members that join your company or your association, they all start on April 1st. And so in a collection of these new people that were joining the administration of the prefecture, the governor was making some comments, and he said, look, you guys are the brains. You guys know what's going on. You're not like the guys who raise pigs or that grow plants or food or anything like that. You guys are the cream of the crop. You guys are the smart ones. So I need you to really dedicate yourself, that sort of rah-rah speech. So yes, somebody heard that and said how derogatory that is to the real working class people, and he's so elitist, and let's get him the hell out. Well, yeah, I don't know about that. But I do know that he was standing in the way of having the maglev tunnel through his prefecture, and it really prevented. See, here come my friends again. They're probably going to wave at me. I think he took the muffler off just to spite it.
Right.
And now here I go. Oh, I better change my position. Here we go. Oh Lord. Woo. Yeah. So he was stopping the construction of the tunnels going through the prefecture because of environmental concerns, and his environmental concerns were not felt just by him. There was a large segment of the population that supported him. He wasn't an unpopular governor, but yeah, he was forced to resign as a consequence of that.
Yeah. Okay.
So that means we're gonna have those. What is that name? It's a new Shinkansen running through the Oi River. Isn't that a crucial issue? Because it's a very important river. They need to do something.
That's right. The as I understand it, the tunneling would go under that, so they're worried about the water, eventually coming through or leaking, or there would be some sort of environmental damage or potential disaster as a consequence of the construction.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then about that, like sort of the closing of the Tokyo office of CBS or NBC, I forgot which. But anyway, if you have a time at the end, please make a comment. But thank you.
No, I want to talk about it now. Maya and I talked about it earlier this week because she
Mhm.
told me about it, and I said, no, that can't be true. CBS is closing their office inside the. I guess they were in the Foreign Correspondents Club where they had an office for 40 years. So Maya, you've been following that too. So please don't be shy about weighing in. But the fact is that they've been here for 40 years, and I
50,
think
sorry, 50.
50 years. Okay. Um,
Excuse me. Yeah.
so 50 years, that means you have a correspondence that is assigned here. And for people, I think most people know about the Foreign Correspondent Club. It is an association of all of the correspondents from all of the foreign and wire presses. They have a correspondent assigned here. They're following the news. They're reporting on it from Tokyo. Let me report on this. And for CBS to close Tokyo at this time when I guess they just got scared because they know that Japanese politics is at least covered by us. So what else can they add? But I think honestly speaking, one of those big powerhouses, they really require to have somebody in Tokyo to be following the news and reporting on it. And you never know when a disaster or some kind of big breaking news is going to hit. And the amount of the learning curve to just become familiar here is so steep, and you can assign a correspondent here. And I guess nowadays you would only assign a correspondent who has some Japan experience. Maybe they've gone to graduate school here. They speak Japanese. Maybe they are Japanese and they got a graduate degree in the United States. So there's less and less of that. But to have them close down their representative office, to me, was just maybe maybe a sign of the times. So, for example, there are many people that say you don't even need an ambassador to be in position in many of these countries because the communications tools didn't exist when we had ambassadors and we needed them to represent the voice of the president or the king or whoever. And nowadays you can just pick up the phone and the communications are immediate. And it's funny. It's funny because with all the technology we have, you would think that we would have more leisure, it would be more comfortable, there would be less controversy. And in fact, that's not the case at all. You would have thought with the Apple iPhone, it did have an impact initially. You didn't have to have a secretary.
Mhm.
You could find things by yourself. You didn't get lost as much, but it really just increased the pace of how things get done and how much obligation and work you have to do. So it's very
Why
curious.
now though? Because the BOJ finally changed, the removed the negative interest rate policy, and then we're seeing the finally the wage growth, and then for those business, I think that maybe they're not only the business but those major, like you said, powerhouse to leave Tokyo. It's very disappointing. But anyway,
Yeah.
thank.
Mhm. Yeah, they cited cost cuts that they couldn't keep up with the costs, so they obviously decided that the Tokyo office was more important, was less important. Sorry,
Yeah.
other offices here in the
Oh,
region.
Timothy kicked out the competition. Okay. Let's.
Yeah, maybe that's another thing. But they also mentioned that, well, they'll do that gradually. I mean, they'll cut the stuff gradually. And, well, they do have, some contracts with BBC, the BBC's network, and maybe, that will be helpful. Even if they close their Tokyo desk, they'll still be able to report about, what is going on in the region. But I don't know that, honestly. It
Yeah.
sounds really strange because to me it looks like this region is just boiling. And well, many people would say yes, Europe is the same, in the same um, you know teacup or whatever you call that. But yeah, this region, Asia, the Asia Pacific, is going to be even more active from now on. So it's really beyond me why they well, once again, why they decided, not to allocate any budget to the Tokyo desk and just close it down. We'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, Yuka. Okay, and so moving on to the next question on LinkedIn from Rumiko. The question is about, I think it was about Osaka.
Bampaku?
Sorry, Bampaku, let me see. Yes. So, could you please share or give us your comments, Timothy, about Osaka Bampaku as a vehicle for a potential Ishin and LDP involvement or collaboration or fallout? Once, yes.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the um, the expo, as it's called in English, the Osaka Expo for 2025, is a great opportunity for Ishin to reassert itself. The LDP knows that, so they want to diminish that or retard that or throw a wrench into it because the LDP really is controlling the purse strings. The LDP, well, actually, the central government provides 1/3 of the cost for the expo. Local businesses provide 1/3 of the cost, and then regular costs are provided by sponsors. So the central government has a key role there. You'll remember that the costs keep going up, and the Osaka government constantly needs to go to Tokyo and say, look, we're kind of overextended again. Could you please allocate a couple of million more for publicity or that sort of thing? Excuse me. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So it really depends on a lot of different things. So, for example, this acquiescence by Komeito to say that these offensive weapons are actually defensive and we're going to allow them the budget process to move forward. Had they not agreed to that, Ishin is in the background, and we can have a coalition partner with Ishin if things aren't moving so well with Komeito. And if Komeito gets so upset with the LDP and says, look, we just don't want to be a part of the coalition government anymore because you guys are just about money, you're just about, kickbacks, you haven't put your house in order, and it's negatively affecting our reputation and our party as well. You've always got somebody else. Even if the LDP or the prime minister holds an election now, the LDP will suffer because all of the people who are implicated in the scandal will probably lose their seat. It's not guaranteed, but they would probably lose their seat if there was an election held now. And the LDP would lose maybe 35 or 40 people. Even with 35 or 40 people lost, with their Komeito partnership, they still have a majority. So they can still dictate committee assignments. They can still railroad through certain policies that are important to them. So something more dramatic needs to happen for something like that. And I think the Osaka Expo presents that kind of opportunity. So people are calculating it all the time. They're wondering, when is the Ishin party really going to make its move and really start lambasting the prime minister? It really, we have to wait to see. But it is all about money. It's about politics. It's about distribution of seats. But Osaka is the stronghold of Ishin, and it will continue to be the stronghold. So as they make encroachments elsewhere, for example, in Tokyo 15 for this during the by-election, there could be another Ishin candidate in Congress as a consequence of that. So it just depends on a lot of different things, but it's always something to watch, and I'm really grateful that somebody's curious enough about it to continue to ask questions. So thank you, Rumiko.
Yes, great. And let me move on once again on LinkedIn. Once again, Albert Lee. So Albert wrote, based on the Global Combat Air Program and FX Fighter Export Guidelines decision, the guidelines published so far still indicate the traditional 3 principles on arm exports still apply,
Yep.
and presumably future Japanese cabinets still have to approve fighter exports on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
Is there any reason to expect the Japanese government to further accelerate reforms of military equipment export policies, or is there some sort of dam break moment that is needed for that?
No, I don't know about a dam break moment. There could be a dam break moment. I've cautioned frequently about this, that all you need is for one of these North Korean missiles to land in the water and kill a Japanese fisherman, or even worse, for a self-defense forces personnel to be killed in some sort of unrelated but something to do with the China or North Korea incident. Then everything changes. The Japanese have so little tolerance for something like that to happen. So you would see a great shift then, and especially if it was even more than that, if it was like several people that were killed, or it was actually, some aggressive action, you would see a very swift change. So what I suspect is that it'll just be incremental. And I think, in fact, already the violations of Article 9 are so broad and so numerous that people are just becoming immune to them. But at some point in time, they'll say, look, there's either going to be a constitutional challenge or some incident that happens, and then a referendum. They can't hold a referendum right now, particularly after the kickback scandal, because the LDP just doesn't have that strong of a control of the diet. In order for a revision of the Constitution, and we're not just talking about Article 9, there are other articles that are screaming for revision as well, and probably for the first round, Article 9 will be avoided. They would avoid that because most people would say, you're only doing this because you're sneakily trying to revise Article 9. So I think once you revise any part of the Constitution, it's never been touched before. Once you revise one, then in the next diet session, there'll be another revision, and then another revision, and probably in lockstep fashion, in every diet session, there will be moves to revise certain parts of the Constitution. And for me, that's healthy, and that's expected and anticipated. But making the first one is really the key feature there, and I think that's why your question is so important. When that happens, what's going to be the trigger? Is it going to be incremental? Is it going to be just boiling frogs in a pot of water? How does this thing sort of happen? But we report on what's going on with the military industrial complex here all the time, and I think that's why this Kishida Biden meeting is so important, and why Dan and I are having this additional briefing on Friday afternoon. So please join us for that. And a great question. I don't know the answer to it, but I have my suspicions.
Yeah, and I think it's in support of what you said about this, it's very typically Japanese culturally as well, to have incremental changes and improvements, as they say here. So sudden change is very rare, and yes, we haven't seen that many of these, sudden change.
Even with this kickback scandal, I think there are a lot of people who would say, gosh, go get them. You've got them. You got them in the position. And it just never happens that way. It really never rolls out the way you want it to read in a novel. It's a little bit tepid and not as satisfying.
Right. And that's how things happen here. And there is a lot of, backroom negotiations, and there is a lot of, that's nemawashi as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. So let me have a look once again at LinkedIn, but it looks like we have... You sound like my cat, Timothy.
I think my hair looks like it too.
Kind of, yes. But the good thing is that you didn't fall off board. It's really great, and that you kept the computer there as well, so that we could finish the briefing, so everybody could ask questions and also hear your answers. Wonderful, great work. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
Keeping your balance there.
And speaking of falling off the boat, during Golden Week, so last year the same thing happened. During Golden Week, I will be on the water for 8 days. So I will have to report from some faraway harbor that probably doesn't have very good Wi-Fi, but we'll still try and keep to it. Maya, it's just amazing. 165 sessions without a break. Just keeping that pace up is wow. I'm so terrified. I'm impressed.
Impressed. Yes, I have to say that all the credit goes to you, okay? All the terror goes to you probably too. So it's on your side. Well, great. Thanks a lot again, Timothy, for the 165th session. Sorry for the disruption from my cat, and she was a kind of eager, to come here, jump on the desk, and show up. And at the same time, thanks to everybody who stayed with us, watched us on one of the 4 platforms. We are live streaming every Sunday from 8:20, and we'll be here once again next Sunday, 8:20. Yes,
Maya, plug the newsletter.
the newsletter as well. Okay, so before that, as you have heard already, Timothy Langley and Dan Harada are going to have their briefing about what's going on deeply within the LDP on Friday at 12 o'clock noon on LinkedIn, exclusively on LinkedIn. So later, the briefing will be available on YouTube as well, so you can watch it there. It will be a little bit shortened because there will be no dead spaces there, silences and so on, they'll be taken out. Another thing is that if you know already that Timothy also shares the synopsises of these briefings, and they're shared on LinkedIn, but since LinkedIn has become a kind of difficult, to navigate recently, we have started sending the synopsises via the newsletter of Langley Squire. So if you have not subscribed yet, but you wish to read, to have the summaries of these sessions, please subscribe for the newsletter of Langley Squire. You can find it once again on every post of Langley Squire, also on YouTube. And I think that's it here.
Please sign up. Thank you.
Yes, please sign up as well. Okay, that's all for today. Timothy, anything else you want to say? You want to tell us where you are going to go to during the Golden Week, or?
Yeah, we have a sale plan that's already drafted up. That will become a little bit clearer because we only go where the wind tells us to go. So we'll know that as the departure date approaches. But probably out past the Oshima Island chain as far as we can go. So I'm really curious where I'm going to do my briefing on the Sunday that falls on. So we'll get to that.
Well, my only hope is that it's a place that has Wi-Fi coverage there. So
yeah.
okay, great. With that, I wish everybody a happy Sunday and a successful new week from tomorrow. And that's it. Stay with us. Come join us next week again.
See you on Friday.
See you on Friday.
Thanks, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy.
Thanks, everybody else.
Thank you.
Woohoo! Here we go.